Okay, hold your hand out and look at your palm. What does it mean to you? Probably not much. But in a moment, we will talk about the secret code on your hands on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Vernon Mahabal, founder and director of the Palmistry Institute in Los Angeles. Now, that combines astrology with palmistry to make predictions about trends for the United States based on repeated patterns that he sees in the thousands of palms that he reads. And he has read thousands of hands. And here he is on Coast to Coast, back. He was with me a couple years ago. Vernon, welcome back.
Hi, George. It's nice to be back.
You too. I bet you've read more hands since you were last with me a few years ago.
One of my friends totaled up my number. I've been doing this for 25 years, and his number was, I've read 70,000 hands in 25 years
That is something.
Of doing this.
Is every palm print different, Vernon?
George, we are all an individual spark of God. We are individual. We are part and parcel of God. We have an individuality that's unique to us. It's never replicated, and every hand is completely original, unique, and full of one's own passion.
Now, you specialize a lot in looking at trends for the United States, but when you read these palms of all these, so many hands, these people, they're looking for personal stuff, aren't they?
Absolutely. My job primarily is to empower people. To me, the prime purpose of human life is to give people self-realization, self-actualization. And the palm is a visual and living astrological chart. And within that chart, many, many lifetimes are seen. And it shows what our talents were, what our abilities are, what our potentials are in this life. So my general readings will be to help a person find their true calling and find their true niche in life. And that's what I like to do, George. I want to empower people. The hand is the most powerful tool to get people to understand their own self-awareness and why they were born, why they're here. Interestingly, we are eternal beings. I believe that we're eternal. The soul is full of knowledge and bliss. And while we're in this physical material body, in this material world, we've forgotten that. And that has a lot to do with the society that we live in that waylays us away from our calling. But when I give a reading, of course, most people want to know, what's my true career? What's my true calling? What is my passion? What am I born to do? And also, where should I live? Where's the best places to live? As they say, location, location, location. So my job, so to speak, is to empower people and let them know what they've been trying to accomplish for the last few lifetimes. And really, it's about being a strong person.
Now, I'm assuming, Vernon, that just about every part of our body has some kind of function, right? Even though, they've said before, that a gallstone, you really don't use it anymore, or something like that. But what's the purpose of the prints and the lines on the palms? I mean, what are they there for?
Great question, George. Every single spiritual or religious scripture talks about the importance of looking at the hand for one's personal self-realization. The Bible does it. The ancient Vedas, the Srimad Bhagavatam, talks very explicitly about hand reading. In fact, there's a book called the Hast. This is in Sanskrit. It's called the Hast Samudrika Shastra, and that means the scripture, actually, of reading hands. And this was put into a pen 5,000 years ago, written on palm leaves. So it's in Sanskrit, and it's actually the science Palmistry is an art, but it's also the science of understanding oneself. Even in this country, the Hopi Indians, in their view, they say that when the child is ready to come out of the womb, God blows on the baby's fingers, and that's what creates their fingerprints, and within their fingerprints is their life purpose. So every religious or spiritual scripture talks about how one can understand what they're doing on this planet and what their sojourn in this life, in their life purpose, is about, and that's how we understand ourselves.
All right, if people, let's assume they're not driving, they all look at their palms right now. Vernon, kind of tell us in generalities what these lines mean on people. I mean, because they're going every way. I've got some long ones, I've got some short ones. What are they?
Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting thing, George. Most palmistry books and most palmists will say that the lines, in other words, they'll spend most of their time on the lines, and actually the lines form maybe 5% or less of my reading. They're not that important. They are the chakra system, just as in the New Age, they use the first chakra, the second chakra, like that. Those are the chakra lines. But what I would say to your audience, and this is a very interesting exercise, is that hold your hand in front of you and keep your fingers closed. Keep the hand straight and look at which finger is longest. Is it between the two fingers, the index finger? Is your index finger longer than your ring finger, or is your ring finger longer than your index finger? So,
do you mean some people actually have a ring finger that's longer than the index finger?
Absolutely. In fact, if your ring finger is longer than your index finger, it means that self-expression is more important than having power or control in the world. For instance, you'll see that on the hand of musicians, actors, actresses, anybody in entertainment, anybody who even does web design. Anyone who's into art or beauty or creativity as a life purpose is going to have a longer ring finger. And by way of comparison, if your index finger is longer, then that means that having power, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but having control over your life and your environment is more important than, let's say, being an artist. And that means that people who have a longer index finger like to take the position of a boss, like to take the position of an agent.
What's more prevalent, Vernon, the index finger being longer or the ring finger? Generally.
50-50.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 50-50.
Huh.
And that's why sometimes artists and musicians don't always fare well in the world monetarily, because it's always the lawyers who have the longer index finger.
I'm not counting the old thumb here, but the four fingers I have, each one is a different size.
And they will be.
Is that normal?
That shows your individuality. Absolutely. The pinky, George, will always be a little bit shorter, but the pinky is a very powerful finger because it has a lot to do with your communications. So in a general way, if your pinky comes up to, and I want everybody to look at their hands under a light, if your pinky comes up to halfway in the middle.
By the way, I never thought I'd do a show talking about the pinky.
Well, now you are.
This is my first.
If the pinky comes up to that first line on the first knuckle on your ring finger, if it comes up there, you're an average communicator. But if the pinky is longer than that, it means you're an effective communicator. And if it's shorter than that, one tends to be very shy and very hesitant in crowds sometimes. But
that's remarkable. How do you know this from a finger?
Well, George, one's entire life purpose is written on the hand. Everything that can be known about a person is written on the hands. You just have to know how to do it. It's like a book. Reading a hand is like, for me, it's like uncovering looking at a Rosetta Stone and figuring out what the lines and the configurations mean.
Probably can't hide anything from you.
No, and everybody can. That's the interesting thing about being a palmist, is that people know that they can trust you, and that they give you their secrets, and they confide in you, and so they can't hide anything from you. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because people always ask me, well, what do you see? What do you say if you see something bad on the hand? And I say what's bad is that a person's in the wrong job, or they're in the wrong location, or they're with the wrong partner. And that's what I try to straighten out. I'll tell a person, okay, this is your exact job. This is your right livelihood. This is where you'll be happy, or this is where you shall live. This is where a great place for you to live, or this next relationship that's coming to you is going to be like this. So
remarkable.
Yeah. So my job is really to get people aligned with their life purpose, help them to become stronger, being a strong person. And then, of course, the interesting thing I want to bring up, George, if a person is doing their life purpose, their free will comes into being. We are not robots. We have a free will. But if we haven't done our life purpose, if we haven't done what we're born to do, then let's say a person's working as a secretary, and she should be an architect. What happens is that her ability to shape her environment and her world is very limited, because she's not doing what she was trying for in previous lifetimes, or what she's acclimated to. So therefore, her free will is very, very little. But if a person does what they're born to do, they'll not only become happy and satisfied, but they'll be able to even do their destiny and even do a bigger destiny than they're even fated for. So then our free will becomes almost unlimited. So my job is to tell a person what their true calling is. And the interesting thing, George, is that many people come to me who are, let's say, 25, 30, 35, 40, and they say, hey, I got a degree in this, but I don't like my career. And I tell them, hey, I'll tell them, this is the career you're born to do. This is your right livelihood. And they'll say, oh, that's what I wanted to do when I got out of high school, but my parents said I wouldn't make money at it, or the school guidance counselor told me it's not a good career. And so, in a sense, our society waylays us from our own intuition. It's notorious for that. And my job is to remind them what their hand says, because all of our secrets are in our hand. And if we follow what's written on our hands, if we follow that book of our own life, we will be not only successful and get consistent results, but we'll be satisfied. And this is why people are not satisfied in this culture, because they're not doing what they're born to do.
That's true. That's a good point. And Vernon, in the next half, I want to talk with you about what you see for America through palmistry, which is pretty darn remarkable. But you got to tell me, how did you get involved in all of this? For a few years after high school, I just kind of floated around. I actually lived in an ashram for 5 years, and got into like a Vedic type of a spiritual life. I got very much into that, and at the same time I was still wondering, well, what should I do for a career? What should I do for a living? And then I saw a guy in New York. His name was Patrick, and he used to read hands at a table on St. Mark's Street. And his name was Patrick Geoffroy. And one day I got up the courage to ask him, what are you doing? But something struck me within him. When he was sitting down at his table reading hands, something in my heart
just said, I want to be able to do this. I want to do that. I don't know what he's doing, but I just felt that subconsciously, George. And then I got up the courage to say, what are you doing? And lo and behold, I became his student for 5 or 6 years, and I practically ate, slept palmistry with him. I would watch all of his readings. I would hear him do readings. I learned a lot from just listening to him give readings and observing him. And then the background I'm from, also like spiritually, the Vedic took me to India many, many times. I've been to India maybe 12 times, and I learned the Vedic palmistry. So I use a mix of both the Western and the Vedic in my practice. And it's...
and did you ever think you'd be doing this for a livelihood?
George, it kind of just came to me. No, I can say honestly, I didn't. I mean, I remember reading a book in my sophomore year of high school. It was actually called On Reading Hands, and it was a book for kids. And I was attracted to it, but it wasn't until I kind of saw my friend Patrick, my teacher, that archetype just kind of blossomed in my heart, and then I came to it. And the interesting thing is I did a bunch of different things. I would manage bands, and I was doing PR work, and I was doing sound for bands and stuff like that. And at the same time, I was reading all these artists and musicians' hands. And then one time I came out to L.A., and I was on tour with this band Motorhead, and the Cro-Mags, and some guy just sat me down in L.A., actually, in front of a 7-Eleven and said, you gave me a reading the other day. You told me what I should be doing. You changed. You have skill at this. He said, I don't know what you're doing with this rock and roll world. So at that time, the career in a sense just came to me. Once I just gave everything up, I started reading hands. It just came to me. Things just started. I started getting a lot of clients, and I
fell into
teaching.
place.
It all fell into place, yeah. I could say to you that sometimes people ask me if I'm born to do this. I would say I've always been attracted to it. I've always been attracted to it. But at the same time, I've studied hard. I've learned every system there is. I've even studied the Mayan system. I've worked very hard to learn this from a very scientific aspect, because there's so many, so-called palmists out there who, kind of cheat the public. I was more attracted to the astrologers, the professional astrologers, than my own brethren. I'm not saying that there's not a lot of good palmists out there. There definitely are, and the age of Aquarius is definitely here. So people are, the public is also becoming more discriminative in what they expect from a palmist or an astrologer. But having said that, when I was coming up, there weren't any real good palmists that I saw. So I decided, hey, I'm going to learn this system, and I'm going to be good at it. I know there's something to it, and of course, Patrick helped me out so much also.
Do the palm prints change as you get older, or they stay the same?
George, your life purpose, the big stuff, never changes. For instance, when I give a person a reading, it's kind of like the principles versus the details. The first reading talks about what your life purpose is, what your talents are, what your abilities are, how you can become successful, and the relationships that you'll meet, and that type of thing. And the details, sometimes the details change, and that's kind of like the furniture in the house. So you may change the rugs, you may change the sofa. The details, for instance, are, maybe opening up like a small shop or something like that. Those may change, but the fact that a person should open up a bakery and keep that going, that's a principle.
All right, hold on, Vernon. We're going to hit the break and come back and talk more about this. I want to ask you about death and palms, and then we'll get into your thoughts about America. Next on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour we'll take your palm calls on Coast to Coast AM. I'll be back in a moment with Vernon as we talk more about the secret code on your hands. And welcome back. We're with Vernon Mahabal as we talk about his work. He also wrote the palmistry cards and crossing paths as well. You have looked at America. Tell me about how you do this, Vernon. America doesn't have hands, does it?
George, if you look at thousands of hands over a period of years, if you see repeated patterns over and over, you can track actually what's going on in a more social aspect. So, for instance, if you see, for instance, that, and I saw this years ago, that our manufacturing would kind of falter or maybe even come to a standstill, this I saw as a regular thing maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. So if I keep seeing this, where if, for instance, if people lose their jobs in a certain sector and they get jobs in another sector, and you see this thousands and thousands of times, then you have a trend there. And of course, I am limited to looking at hands, but then again, hands are the real barometer of what's going on in this country, because I'm looking at the hands of Americans, and they're all carrying around an astrological chart. So if I see things replicated in hands on a social level over and over, I can make predictions.
Okay, so let me ask you this then, though. If you make predictions based on, do you have to have a certain amount of hands to look at before you can come up with some kind of a feeling for what's going on?
Absolutely. You can't just look at, 5 hands in the neighborhood.
Yeah, okay.
If I'm looking at, let's say, 2 to 3 hands a day, 5 days a week, and then, of course, other hands that I see at, gatherings and parties and Starbucks, you can come up with really, really, really good research. But, no, you can't do it if you're only looking at 5 hands, like, every a month. But for instance, if you see that people are taking on certain careers or successful in certain careers, and they're dropping other careers, you can see trends. You can see repeated patterns, and that then you're able to, in a sense, predict the future, if you will, for America.
If you see a certain group of people in any particular industry, let's say all automobile workers or baseball players or actors, can you then come up with some kind of trend about what's going on with them?
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, years ago, I did see a little bit of a stymieing with this manufacturing aspect. And I don't really just think it's something that is not meant to happen. It is true that, and I do believe this, that there's a certain class of people who are trying to, get it out of our country and trying to stop America's progress by taking it out of America and putting it in other countries' hands. That is, and they're weakening the country. I do believe that. But there's also a greater karma, George. The interesting thing is a country like England. England, a long time ago, Great Britain, took over the world, as it were, years and years ago. And now in Britain, the desire to, in a sense, colonize everything or take over things, it's pretty much dead within their culture, within their genetic pattern. And America was like that in the 50s and 60s, like that, and before that. But now the generations don't really have that ambition in the world of manufacturing. And what I see is the trend in the future is that what we will import and export is a little bit more of the spiritual aspect. In other words, China wants to be where we were in 1950. So does India. But we've already done that, and the generations that are coming up are going to be more into a more personal awakening. Just like if you go to any, supermarket or any if you just driving around America, you see yoga places all over, natural healing places all over, organic food markets everywhere. You see You see more and more New Age type stores. We are going to expand as a country into these more natural therapies, and this will actually be our base. The age of Aquarius is here. And the interesting thing is, as I mentioned last time I was on Coast, I said that in 2014 we're going through a new period, Rahu. That's a planet.
I remember that.
Yeah, and the period that we were in before was Mars, and Mars is a 9-year period. And I'm looking at, in a sense, through people's hands, the chart of the United States of America. And 9 years ago, let's say in 2007, right before Obama was selected as president, that period is now over, 2014. And the interesting thing is that that period of Mars, Mars, as we know, is a planet of war. So during this period, that's when more guns were bought, ammo, checkpoints were there. Mars is a time of the bully. So the government being the bully, the government doing things behind our back. Mars is a period of violence and strife. Mars is a period where people in charge are going to be arrogant and belligerent. Mars is a time of conflict. Mars is a time of boldness for the bully. So now the interesting thing is that as we go through Rahu, Rahu was just coming into the picture when Snowden exposed the NSA. Now, in a very quick way, Rahu is a magnifying glass. Rahu, the planet Rahu, is an observer. And so as Snowden said, for instance, Snowden's idea was that the NSA is spying on us. Well, just like Newton's law, for every action is an equal and opposite reaction. Well, during this period of Rahu, which will last 18 years, from 2014 to 2032, Americans, and we see this now, are also observing the government. In other words, as Rahu is a time of spying and secrecy and being aware of things. Not only is the government doing that to us, but during this time period, we will be vigilant and aware of what the government is doing. It's a two-way street. So during this time, the federal government will. It's not going to be able to do stuff behind our back anymore. Just like a bully, the aspect of Mars is that Mars acts as a bully on the weak. It takes advantage of the weak. But in Rahu, one becomes strong and observes what's around them and then takes action. And the interesting thing, George, is that when we went fully into Rahu, in other words, sometimes it takes a few months for these planets to really hit their 100% mark. Well, the key thing here was the BLM Bundy situation. And
tell me how that would affect all this.
George, that was a pivotal point of what we are going to see in America. That aspect where the Americans stood up to the bullying government. Now, people are not just going to stand up with guns. People are going to stand up with their knowledge, with their intelligence, with being aware. We're becoming more and more aware of what the government has been doing behind the scenes, and we are going to stop it just because we are becoming more aware.
Well, I'm a gun advocate, but I hope they don't have to stand up with guns.
Well, there'll be
what a mess that'll be.
George, there will be a certain contingent that may, but there will also be a certain contingent that will just ignore the government. There'll be other contingents that will stand up, let's say politically or socially against the government. At a certain point, within 5 to 6 to 7 years in Rahu, people will absolutely just ignore the mandates of the federal government and start to form their own strong communities.
Does that mean there's going to be chaos, Vernon?
The interesting thing, George, is that we are going to, as the middle class, we're going to continue to go through a little bit of what we have been going through. It may get a little worse here and there, but we're going to come out of it. And what's happening is that people are going to find different trades throughout that. They're not going to stop us. See, the whole point is that the age of Aquarius is upon us, and in the Vedic view, they call it the Chaitanya age, and this is a time when the demons will. By their own machinations, completely fall apart. People are going to fight the demons in control in very different types of ways. And the demons also have their astrologers, they have their psychics, they have their astrologers, and they know their time is up. They will crumble. In fact, during this time, Rahu is a time where demons themselves start fighting with each other. And this is what will happen as we go through this 18-year period of Rahu. They can't keep this thing going on very much longer, and they will start to fight amongst themselves. They may even kill each other. The system that they developed we all know it's artificial. It cannot continue. But they're going to destroy themselves in the process because it's not just the Americans, the patriots are going to destroy them. It's the planets that are also saying, okay, you've had your day. You've had, almost 100 years, 200, maybe 150, 200 years of bringing your devilish aspects of poisoning the planet, chemtrails, vaccines, GMOs, you name it. And there's a higher, let's say, there's a higher thing going on, and that's the planetary aspects of the age of Aquarius, the Chaitanya era, that's going to defeat this. And of course, even in my practice, day in and day out for years, all I see is people who are into naturopathic medicine and organic food, this type of thing. And at some point, it is definitely going to change the social construct, because the point is that the demons have been operating behind our back, checkpoints and vaccines, and now they're being exposed. One thing I'd like to say also is that Rahu as a planet deals with poison. And the demon's calling card, you'll know a demon by poison. So, for instance, like vaccines, chemtrails, GMOs, and people are becoming more aware of these poisons that the demons are, throwing into us. The interesting thing, George, is that they know.
And we're in that cycle now, though, the Rahu cycle?
We just went into it about 2 days before the Bundy BLM standoff.
Okay.
That's where we are.
How long does it last?
It lasts a total of 18 years, George. In
18 years?
Yes, but the interesting thing is that Rahu is a materialistic planet. Rahu is a very materialistic planet, and I don't mean that in just a greed, lusty type of a way. In other words, it wants to build itself. We have seen what Mars does is crumble everything. Mars is conflict. Mars is strife. Mars is that. So what Mars does is it crumbles things. What Rahu does is build everything back up very, very slowly. And what we are going to see is we're going to see America break up into smaller provinces. People are going to be more aware of their own communities. Local businesses will start up. People are going to find a way. George, we're not like China. We're not like Russia. We're Americans. We have had freedom in our blood for almost 300 years. They're not going to take it away from us. It's not in our karma. It's not in our planet.
When you say
That's the whole point.
When you say break up into little provinces, what do you mean? Splinter states or what?
It could be both. It could be splinter states. It could be the states becoming more powerful than the federal government. That's what I see. The states, the communities, the provinces will become more powerful than the federal government. It's right now, whatever the federal government mandates, that's what the states do. But we're going to see the people rise up to say, we don't want this. We have our own set of agenda, and we're not going to be slaves to the federal government anymore. And the reason is because the federal government is now being exposed and will continue to be exposed in everything that they do. And we're seeing that now. We are absolutely seeing that now. But we will see people, as Americans, that natural ambition that we have. What I see on people's hands is that we'll go into more artisan type crafts and arts. If we have the globalism that I see is dying. The local stuff is going to happen. I can't tell you.
I hope so.
It's going to. It's a fact.
Well,
this is what's happening astrologically.
Is palmistry more of a science or is it more of a psychic tool?
I like that question, George. Palmistry is a science because it is an astrological construct. It becomes an art when you use your intuitive or psychic energy to read around the planet, so to speak. So let's just say I brought up that idea of if a person's an architect, there are certain things in the hand. I may look at 30, 40, 50 different things in the hand that will show me that a person's good at architectural designing or that engineering or that type of thing. And then my intuition kind of will read around the planets, if you will, and tell me what type of designs they might be into. And so it's both a science and an art. But I really do feel that if one's going to do palmistry, they really have to learn the scientific principle of it and understand it from a more analytical way rather than just saying I'm a psychic. Because that's not professional. That's almost immoral.
Do you see us returning one day back to these glory days of a country?
George, I absolutely do. And that's when I see Jupiter as will go into a Jupiter period. I mean, of course, we're going to see this in about 10, 11 years. We're going to see our country becoming strong again. We're going to see the whole problem here, George, is that Americans are good people. There was a Frenchman who said years ago, America is great because America is good. But once it starts to once it loses that goodness, it will no longer be great. And Americans are waking up to the fact that our government is doing things that the average American, just will not cast their vote for. So we're going to become a strong people again. And we'll see in about 10 or 11 years, Americans are going to be, again, strong people. They're going to do things more independently without giant businesses. They're going to return to our strength again. And by the time we get into the Jupiter period, which is 2032, Jupiter is a planet of religion and spirituality. And at that point, America's glory will be our spiritual aspect. Just like right now, the demons are trying at every stage, with whether they use the entertainment world or they use the schooling, et cetera, et cetera. At every turn, they're trying to destroy our morals, our principles, our strength of character. The average American sometimes doesn't even know the difference between black and white. And I'm not criticizing here. I'm just saying this is what they're trying to do. The demons are taking away our sensitivity. They're trying to make us robotic. They're trying to take away who we are, which is an emotional, spiritual soul.
Vernon, hold on. We're at the top of the hour already. We're going to come back and talk more about what you do, palmistry, and we'll take some phone calls in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM.